Absolutely. In terms of that Amazon story, I think you're absolutely right in terms of what is happening here. But I think this is going to be an ongoing process. We have seen Amazon victorious here, but I suspect that it's going to be something that we are going to be tracking a great deal over the next few months and years as this process slowly unfolds. I think the vote count is interesting this time round. I think the fact that it's almost 2-1, that was certainly what our reporting was a little bit earlier on. It's going to be something that I think is going to be repeated and constantly repeated. This time, as you say, Alex, it has not been an instrumental turn in the way that the union evolution is going to work at Amazon, but it's just going to be something that we're going to come back to time and time again.
Yeah, and also, you know, the question of what big conglomerates like a Facebook, like an Amazon, have done in terms of worker power is also something that many have been writing about over the last decade. In terms of, is that really preventing the Phillips curve from working better, et cetera? Well, let's ask the economic expert on that. Michael McKee is joining us here. Mike, this was a win for Amazon. What's the significance here?
It's significant for Amazon in the sense that it does sort of put a cork in the idea of immediately organizing all of their warehouse distribution centers, which would be a major expense for the company, although not as easy as it would seem. And it shows that in Alabama. I think if you were going to pick a place to try to unionize any company, Alabama would be about the worst. It's definitely a red state. It's definitely a right-to-work state. And so they picked a really tough place to try to make a stand. It doesn't mean that we won't see unions rise in the coming years. Joe Biden is going to emphasize that in his rebuilding plan. But it does, at the moment, represent a bit of a setback to the worker movement.
In terms of what happens next, do you think? We have an administration that is pro-labor, is looking increasingly like that is the tone and tenor. You look at what's coming out of the Fed in terms of its desire to make sure that the labor market works for everybody. How do these two stories interact, Mike? You've got a budget that we're focusing on here. The government's going to be spending huge amounts of money. It's going to have to fund that somehow. There's a relationship with labor. There's a relationship with capital. I'm just kind of wondering how this is going to evolve.
Well, the bottom line fight is going to be about whether having union workers be required to do certain jobs or putting money into areas where unionized workers dominate the industry is going to be more expensive, and therefore you get less bang for the buck. That's the traditional argument up on Capitol Hill. But in this case, you do have the administration pushing the idea of union jobs. And the reason is that over the years, since unions have declined, we only have about 10.8% of workers unionized last year. That's about half of what it was in 1983. We've seen wages and salaries increases decline. And the administration is tying weaker wage growth for the bottom 99% to the idea that labor has lost power. And so there's going to be a real push on that. Their Build Back Better plan, the infrastructure plan, calls for prevailing wages. They don't say you have to hire union workers, but you got to pay prevailing wages. So you would be looking at union-type wages for many of the jobs that the administration wants to do.